What screams insecurity but most people don't realize? When you achieve something or improve your life in any way, and their first instinct is to tease or make fun of you, it actually screams instant jealousy. When they found a point that makes them look better than the other person and continue to overstay on that point. Insulting your friend in front of others to be cool. Constantly talking shit on other people for an inflated sense of self-worth. Always having something negative to say when something good happens to someone else. For example, oh, you're going to hate that new job, or they should have done X instead. Just be happy that someone else is happy. On the flip side, being open about your insecurities and really trying to overcome them is a great character trait. I see a lot of comments here branding common insecurities as red flags. And I don't think one should consider insecurities inherently evil. Being insecure doesn't make you a bad person. It's how you let your struggles control you that defines whether they are problematic or not. Teachers of Reddit. What was an inappropriate comment or behavior you had to discipline a student for, yet you secretly thought was hilarious? I teach kindergarten. One of my sweetest little girls, coming inside from recess, smiles and says, "Man, it's fucking cold outside." I asked her to repeat herself. And sure enough, I heard her correctly. Hard not to laugh. Kid printed 1,000 copies of Danny DeVito photoshopped into a chip and labeled, Danny Dorito, and taped copies of it everywhere. I was tutoring a kid, definitely on the autistic spectrum. After school, he asked to go to the bathroom. After 15 minutes I knocked on the door. He opened the door and said, "Oh, sorry. I was just masturbating," incredibly nonchalantly. Caught off guard, I just replied, "Wash your hands please?" Quote. Male teacher here. Teaching sex ed. Going over methods of protection. I was talking about condoms and this guy said, "Hey, Mr. G4M3C0CKS. You know that barcode at the base of every condom?" Quote. I said, "Don't think I've ever noticed that." He replied, "Oh, I guess you ain't gotta roll yours down that far. Huh?" Quote. I laughed probably harder than I should have. I teach preschool. 2/5 Yos. We have a student with a speech delay. He talks but it's not terribly clear. Except during an incident last week. A little girl was being mean to him. He said, "Sally is being a bitch." Quote. We paused. Coworker. Oh, a witch. You called her a witch, right? Like from Halloween? Kid. No. She's a bitch. Not witch. Sally is a bitch. Very hard to correct him. And tell mom about it. With a straight face. To be fair, he wasn't wrong. She was kinda being a bitch to him at the time. Kindergartner shoved her hand into the spinach at the salad line in lunch. Held it up and shouted, "Leaps as for sheep," before throwing it in the ground in disgust. I had to walk away while another teacher scolded her for wasting food because I couldn't keep a straight face. What is your favorite quote from The Simpsons? He's not the sharpest pencil in the pencil thing. Chief Wiggum. Never. Marge. I can't live the button-down life like you. I want it all. The terrifying lows. The dizzying highs. The creamy middles. Sure, I might offend a few of the blue noses with my cocky stride and musky odors. Oh, I'll never be the darling of the so-called city fathers who cluck their tongues, stroke their beards, and talk about what's to be done with this Homer Simpson. Quote exclamation mark. Seymour, the house is on fire. No mother, it's just the northern lights. You'll have to speak up, I'm wearing a towel. You don't win friends with salad. You tried your best and you failed miserably. The lesson here is never try. Who is fighting so hard to be okay in life and just needs a break? Got cheated on. Ended up quitting my job because it was awfully stressful and I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. And moved back in with my parents. Trying to find a job at the moment, but the struggle is real. GF broke up with me. Best friend died. Dog died. Chronic migraines. Tinnitus. Other health problems. Parents losing their memories. Family either dead or far away. Too poor for simple pleasures, let alone therapy. It seems that suddenly I'm very alone. At this point I'm essentially waiting for my body to deliver me a coup de grace. I'll give it what fight I've got in me purely as a token gesture, but whatever higher purpose I had in life disappeared this year. For now it's just animalistic survival. A break would be nice. I'm going to generally wave my hands around, and you can infer that to mean everyone. I just want someone to hug me and tell me everything's gonna be okay. 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So I'm going to venture a guess and say more than 63%. Me. Had to sell my camera earlier this year to help my mom out on bills causes inflation sucks, and she has to pay everything because I'm disabled and can't work but not disabled enough to receive disability. Then my cat, who was my only friend, died. Our microwave then caught fire. And now our car is messed up. This all happened since September, lol. It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. Jean-Luc Picard. What is the ultimate embodiment of this? Health nut friend of mine that died of stage 4 lung cancer at age 28. My cousin, his wife, and 2 kids were at their friend's wedding. They stayed late to help clean up afterwards because the cleaning crew was short-staffed. Because they stayed a few hours later than every other guest, they got caught in rush hour traffic trying to get back home. Out of state. While in traffic, they came to a complete stop on the interstate, but the tractor-trailer driver behind them was texting and didn't notice. My cousin and his whole family were crushed on impact. They did the right things. Helped out people in need. Followed traffic laws. And then had a quadruple funeral. So, everything right, and it still resulted in a huge loss. Historically speaking, Cleopatra. She was a literal genius and an excellent leader. But she was stuck with a fallen kingdom which had been bankrupted by nearly 200 years of her psychotic inbred family using it as their private playground. She made a lot of very smart moves trying to cozy up to Roman leaders and create strong alliances. But then they got themselves killed. And ultimately left her with no resources to fall back on. Even the best player can't win if they're dealt a shitty hand. My dad. Seriously, the best guy I've ever known. Kind. Empathetic. Fair. He is, to my eyes, the embodiment of everything a person should be. Never once raised his voice. That I've heard. When you'd err, he'd help you back on the path. Kind of guy that made you want to be better. Not in fear of punishment, but because you couldn't stand to disappoint a guy who puts so much faith into others. If anything, the one flaw I can think of that he has is naivety and always believing the best of people. My mom, however, dumped him and broke his heart. He never remarried. 30 years later, he's not been in a relationship since. According to both their stories, he was just too nice. My mom genuinely complained about the fact that it was impossible to argue with him. Supposedly he'd always be ready to compromise and work together to try find mutual ground. She couldn't stand it. She left him for a number of other boyfriends in quick succession who were just the worst people. She ended up marrying one of them for 10 years and divorced him earlier this year due to physical and emotional abuse. I still stay in contact with my mom to this day. She's had a very tumultuous life and an abusive childhood. But I often think back on everything she's shared about my father, both when sober and drunk. Through all her rants and complaints about him and her dislike of him, never once has any of her complaint ever made him sound like anything other than a solid guy. It just sounds like he did everything right. It just wasn't what she wanted. There's a lot of this in war. Armchair generals love to tell you that X-leader was an idiot because he lost. But a lot of the times that leader made the correct decision with the information they had available. And it's not always an indication of bad intelligence either. Some motherfuckers are just crazy and do things that no sane person would do. So no reasonable person expects them to do it. Relationships. At least at young age. Not sure if it the same applies throughout 40s and 50s, you can start out as two incredibly aligned people, considerate and attentive to each other's feelings. But sometimes the wants of one changes and throws a monkey wrench in the whole operation. Subscribe, my brothers.